What if the thing you called impossible is only waiting for one shift in what you believe and declare? Not tomorrow, not someday, but right now. There is a hidden principle that turns locked doors into open pathways, and most people overlook it while waiting for circumstances to change. Before going further, pause and reflect on one situation in your life that feels completely out of reach. Hold it in your mind as you continue, because the next part will show you how that very situation can begin to turn. The invisible realm of faith operates as a governing reality that is not dependent on what the eyes can see or what the natural mind can calculate. It functions like a deeper layer of existence where outcomes are shaped before they ever appear in the physical world. When a person understands this, they begin to realize that visible limitations are not final verdicts, but temporary expressions of a deeper condition that can be changed from within. Faith, in this sense, is not passive hoping or emotional optimism. It is a settled inner conviction that what is true in the unseen realm can override what is currently being experienced. Many people live entirely within the boundaries of what they can measure, touch, or prove, and because of that, they unconsciously give authority to circumstances. But the invisible realm works in reverse order. It begins with belief, then alignment, then manifestation. When someone consistently holds a conviction that is anchored beyond physical evidence, that conviction starts to influence decisions, reactions, and endurance. It shapes how a person speaks under pressure, how they respond to delay, and how they interpret setbacks. Over time, this inner alignment creates a momentum that begins to challenge the structure of limitation itself. This is why two people can face the same situation, yet experience entirely different outcomes. One is governed by what is seen, while the other is governed by what is believed beyond sight. The unseen realm does not respond to panic or contradiction. It responds to consistent inner agreement. When belief remains steady, even when nothing changes externally, it creates a spiritual position of authority over the situation. Eventually, what was once considered fixed begins to lose its rigidity because it is being influenced from a deeper source than circumstance. The natural world appears solid, but it is not ultimate. It is responsive to a higher order that begins within the unseen conviction of a person who refuses to let visible evidence define final truth. Words are not just sounds produced by the mouth. They function as carriers of direction, belief, and internal agreement. Every spoken statement reveals what a person has accepted within themselves, and over time those statements begin to build the environment they live in. When words are repeated with conviction, they stop being mere expressions and start becoming patterns that shape perception and expectation. At a deeper level, speech connects inner belief to external reality. What is consistently spoken reflects what is consistently imagined and accepted internally. If a person repeatedly speaks limitation, delay, or defeat, those words reinforce a mental framework that expects restriction. But when speech is aligned with firm conviction, it begins to reframe how a person responds to situations even before circumstances change. There is also a reinforcing cycle between belief and speech. What is believed influences what is spoken, and what is spoken strengthens what is believed. This cycle can either trap a person in doubt or lift them into a stronger position of expectation. Over time, spoken agreement becomes a type of internal programming that guides decisions, reactions, and emotional stability. Under pressure, words become even more significant. In difficult moments, people often speak based on fear or immediate emotion, and those words tend to lock them into the very condition they are trying to escape. But when speech remains steady and aligned with inner conviction, it prevents external pressure from redefining internal truth. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A single declaration made in excitement has less impact than a steady pattern of words spoken with settled belief. The power lies in alignment over time, where speech no longer contradicts conviction but reinforces it continuously. Eventually, what is spoken with unwavering agreement begins to influence not only mindset but also behavior, choices, and persistence. It reshapes expectation, and expectation begins to open doors that once seemed permanently closed, because language has been consistently setting a different direction within the person. Doubt often does not appear as a loud force. It usually enters quietly through repeated exposure to discouraging thoughts, delayed results, and conflicting experiences. Over time, it settles into the mind as a background assumption that things will not change, even when outward effort continues. This silent influence is powerful because it does not always announce itself, yet it steadily reshapes expectation and weakens inner conviction. When doubt becomes accepted, it begins to act like a filter through which every situation is interpreted. Instead of seeing possibilities, the mind starts noticing only obstacles. Instead of expecting progress, the heart anticipates delay. This shift is subtle at first, but it gradually becomes a pattern that influences how a person responds to challenges, how long they persist, and what they believe is ultimately achievable. The strongest effect of doubt is not just emotional hesitation, but internal division. A person may still attempt progress outwardly, but inwardly they are already preparing for failure. This divided state reduces consistency, and inconsistency weakens endurance. When endurance weakens, even small delays feel like confirmation that nothing will change. Doubt also grows through repetition. Every time a negative conclusion is rehearsed internally, it gains strength. The mind becomes trained to default to limitation rather than possibility. Over time, this creates a mental environment where expectation is always lowered before action even begins, and this becomes a hidden barrier that blocks progress more effectively than external resistance. Breaking this cycle requires a shift in internal agreement. When a person stops reinforcing negative conclusions and begins to hold steady conviction despite delayed outcomes, the influence of doubt begins to weaken. The mind slowly relearns how to expect differently, even when circumstances remain unchanged. As doubt loses authority, clarity begins to return. The mind becomes less reactive to pressure and more stable under delay. What once felt impossible starts to feel uncertain rather than final, and that shift opens space for persistence, which is where change often begins to form gradually and consistently. Faith is not a temporary emotional surge or a moment of positive thinking. It is a settled inner position that remains firm regardless of external evidence. It is the ability to stand with certainty in what is believed, even when there is no visible confirmation supporting it. This kind of faith is not dependent on feelings, circumstances, or immediate results, but on an unshaken conviction that what is believed is still valid even in silence and delay. Many people confuse faith with desire or hope. Desire wishes something will happen, and hope waits for something to improve. But faith operates differently because it acts from the assumption that what is believed is already real in principle, even if not yet visible in form. This creates a different kind of response to life, where delay is not interpreted as denial and opposition is not treated as final authority. True faith also produces action that matches conviction. It does not remain passive while expecting change. It influences how a person speaks, decides, and persists. When belief is genuine, it naturally begins to guide behavior, even in small decisions. This alignment between inner certainty and outward conduct is what gives faith its strength and stability over time. Under pressure, faith becomes most visible. When circumstances contradict expectation, faith does not collapse into confusion or contradiction. Instead, it holds its position and continues to maintain agreement with what is believed rather than what is seen. This stability is what separates temporary enthusiasm from lasting conviction. Another important aspect of faith is that it resists being rewritten by time. Delay does not weaken it when it is grounded properly. Instead of adjusting belief downward to match conditions, it maintains its original stance and allows inner certainty to remain unchanged despite external fluctuation. Over time, this kind of steady conviction builds resilience. It trains the mind to stay consistent, strengthens emotional stability, and prevents circumstances from becoming final interpreters of truth. In that steady place, belief becomes stronger than resistance, and inner certainty begins to shape how life is approached, even before any visible change appears. Persistence in belief is the quiet force that keeps a person moving forward when everything around them suggests stopping. It is not driven by excitement or short bursts of motivation, but by a steady inner resolve that refuses to abandon conviction simply because results are delayed. This kind of persistence becomes the bridge between what is believed and what is eventually experienced. Most breakthroughs are not stopped by lack of ability, but by the loss of endurance. When early expectations are not met, many people slowly reduce their level of belief without realizing it. They may continue actions outwardly, but inwardly they begin to lower their expectation. Persistence in belief resists this internal decline and maintains the original conviction even when visible progress is absent. This endurance is tested most during silence and delay. In those moments, it becomes easy to interpret stillness as failure. However, persistence understands that absence of immediate results does not equal absence of progress. It holds steady through the unseen phase, where change is forming in ways that are not yet observable. Over time, this consistency builds an internal strength that cannot be easily shaken by external conditions. Each time a person chooses to remain steady instead of giving up, their capacity to endure increases. This creates a stronger foundation for future breakthroughs because the mind becomes trained to stay committed beyond pressure. Persistence also protects belief from being rewritten by temporary circumstances. Without it, belief becomes flexible and adjusts downward whenever opposition appears. With it, belief remains anchored, refusing to change its direction based on short-term evidence. This stability is what allows momentum to build over time. Eventually, what once felt like a long delay becomes the very process through which readiness is developed. The waiting period is no longer seen as wasted time, but as strengthening time. In that steady continuation, breakthroughs begin to take shape quietly before they are ever fully revealed. Every situation that appears impossible contains layers that are not immediately visible, and within those layers exists what can be described as a hidden doorway. On the surface, the condition may look closed, final, or irreversible, but that outer appearance does not reveal the full structure of what is actually present. What seems like a wall is often only the limit of natural perception, not the limit of what can truly change. This hidden doorway is not discovered through panic or force, but through a steady posture of trust that refuses to accept visible conditions as absolute truth. When a person stops reacting only to what they see and begins to hold a deeper confidence that change is still possible, their awareness begins to shift. What was once overlooked starts to become noticeable, not because the situation changed first, but because perception was no longer restricted to surface evidence. Impossible circumstances tend to create the illusion of finality, but that illusion weakens when sustained trust is maintained. Trust acts like a key that does not break the situation open by pressure, but reveals pathways that were previously ignored. These pathways can appear as new ideas, unexpected help, timing shifts, or internal clarity that was not present before. The reason many never experience this doorway is because attention remains fixed on the closed aspect of the situation. When focus is locked only on what is not working, awareness becomes narrow and possibilities remain hidden. But when trust remains steady, attention becomes less dominated by fear, allowing deeper insight to emerge gradually. This process is not always immediate, and it rarely follows predictable patterns. Often the shift begins internally before anything changes externally. A calmness replaces agitation, clarity replaces confusion, and patience replaces panic. These internal changes are often the first signs that the hidden doorway is becoming accessible. What was once considered permanently blocked begins to feel less absolute, and in that softened certainty, movement becomes possible again, because unseen pathways begin to align with steady trust. Authority is not simply a position or an external title. It is an internal state where belief and speech move in complete agreement without contradiction. When a person's inner conviction and outward declaration are aligned, their words carry a different weight because they are no longer speaking from uncertainty but from settled assurance. This alignment creates a sense of direction that is not easily shaken by opposing circumstances. Many people lose this sense of authority because their inner thoughts and spoken words are in conflict. They may desire change internally, but externally they express hesitation, doubt, or fear. This inconsistency weakens their influence over their own mindset and over how they respond to challenges. When inner belief says one thing and speech says another, instability becomes the natural outcome. True authority begins when internal agreement is established first. When a person becomes fully settled in what they believe, their speech naturally begins to reflect that stability. There is no need for forced expression because words flow from conviction rather than confusion. This creates consistency, and consistency builds strength over time. Under pressure, this alignment becomes even more important. Difficult situations tend to expose contradictions between what is believed and what is spoken. If fear takes over speech, authority weakens. But if conviction remains steady and speech continues to reflect that conviction, pressure loses its ability to dominate the internal state. The person remains centered instead of being pulled into reaction. This kind of authority does not depend on external validation or immediate results. It is sustained by inner agreement that does not shift with changing conditions. When belief remains firm and speech continues to reinforce that firmness, a person develops a stable inner posture that is not easily disrupted by circumstances. Over time, this alignment produces a quiet strength that influences decisions, persistence, and emotional stability. Instead of being reactive to what is seen, the person becomes consistent in what is declared and expected, and that consistency shapes the direction of their life more than momentary conditions ever could. Miracles are often not sudden interruptions of reality, but the result of a shift that begins when human limitation is fully acknowledged. There comes a point where effort, reasoning, and ability reach their boundary, and beyond that boundary, a different kind of dependence becomes necessary. This transition is not weakness. It is the recognition that natural capacity was never designed to be the final authority over every situation. At that edge of limitation, a deeper form of trust begins to take shape. It is not based on visible proof or immediate confirmation, but on the conviction that what cannot be solved naturally is not beyond resolution. This trust does not deny reality. It simply refuses to accept reality as permanently fixed. It holds the awareness that conditions can change even when all evidence suggests otherwise. When a person reaches this point, something shifts internally before anything changes externally. The pressure to control outcomes begins to loosen. Anxiety gives way to steadiness. Instead of constantly analyzing what is wrong, attention begins to rest on what is still possible beyond human control. This inner adjustment creates space for new direction. Miracles, in this sense, are not always dramatic events that appear instantly. Many begin as subtle turns, unexpected timing, sudden clarity, or a door that seemed closed beginning to open slightly. These early movements often go unnoticed because they do not match expectations of how change should look. What makes this process powerful is that it is not dependent on human strength maintaining everything. Instead, it operates in the place where human strength ends and continued trust begins. That is why moments of surrender often become turning points, not because everything is resolved immediately, but because the burden of forcing outcomes is removed. In that surrendered steadiness, what once appeared impossible begins to lose its finality, and new possibilities begin to unfold in ways that could not have been planned or produced through effort alone. In the end, what appears impossible is often only a reflection of human limitation, not a final verdict on what can be changed. Much of life's resistance is shaped by what is believed, what is spoken, and what is repeatedly reinforced within the heart and mind. When these inner forces remain aligned in doubt, limitation feels permanent. But when they shift into steady conviction, even long-standing barriers begin to lose their grip. The journey from impossibility to possibility is not built on sudden emotional intensity, but on consistent inner agreement over time. It is shaped by persistence when results are delayed, by stability when circumstances contradict expectation, and by trust when natural solutions are no longer enough. Each step of steady belief strengthens the inner foundation that supports outward change. What is most important is not the size of the challenge, but the position a person holds within themselves while facing it. When fear governs, the situation feels larger than life. When conviction governs, the situation begins to lose its authority. This internal shift is often where transformation begins long before any visible evidence appears. Impossibility loses power when it is no longer accepted as final. As inner alignment strengthens, perception changes, endurance increases, and expectation rises above what is currently seen. In that place, doors that once seemed permanently closed begin to respond differently, not because pressure increased, but because agreement within changed. Ultimately, the path from impossible to possible is a journey of inner stability. It is the quiet decision to remain steady when everything suggests otherwise, to hold conviction when delay tries to weaken it, and to continue expecting change when nothing yet appears different. In that steady place of trust and alignment, what once seemed unreachable begins to move into reality step by step.